Micah Miller trying to spring a pass ahead. Nobody in front of Jack Paling. Moves on with a blast and scores! Jack Paling
We aren't giving up on chances, and we just got to bottom line execute.
Waits, passes in front. Great save, Paluzzi, as she robs a Gopher in front of her. And that was number 8, Kipton Keller, on the grade A opportunity.
For me as a coach, that's the kind of D you're always looking for, because they don't grow on trees for sure. And he's done a really good job being a captain of a really young team this year.
It was a really cool thing to see for them to really appreciate what I've done on and off the ice.
to the far half wall. Jack Paling trying to play it into the corner. Now Paling turns, squares his body to the slot, sends it up high toward Jack. A shot makes its way through, and they score! Right along the blue line, Nick Paling was in front of the net, and St. Cloud State's got a lead here in the
And welcome back to the Den Husky Morning House podcast, fans. It is episode number 44 here on this Sunday morning. I'm Nick Maxon alongside Noah Grant. Noah, we need to start off with a couple of housekeeping procedures here for you, but there was one that maybe we missed this week. But you know what? Things happen. It is January. It's almost the spring semester here, as we are actually on the eve of spring semester. Mm-hmm. So it wouldn't be close to school if we didn't have some type of a technical difficulty, would it be?
Yeah, definitely not. So as people who are watching the YouTube stream might have noticed by now, my background is a little bit different because I moved. I got into my apartment on Friday down in Minot, and I'm all set and ready for school. Actually, if you have been watching our previews and recaps of the men's hockey season in Duluth, that photo of the background that I normally have at my house, it's actually a computer-generated background. It's actually a green screen behind me, as you can probably identify now because of the different background today for episode number 44. But what Nick is alluding to is because of all that moving on Friday, that is usually the day that I program the two-line fan trivia question into our Twitter page so that it comes out the following Saturday at noon. And I totally missed that because of everything that was going on. So we will not have a trivia winner today, but maybe it's like, I don't know, maybe it's maybe a blessing in disguise just because of all the other things that we do have going on. Nick, we have some changes to the show to kind of fill in as far as personnel are concerned, as well as we do have a pair of former women's hockey players that will be joining us on Tuesday for our Healthy Scratch interview segment. And we have an upcoming guest that we're recording with this week. So Nick, do you want to kind of fill the listeners in on some changes as far as personnel in the coming weeks, and then guests that are to be upcoming in the following week as well?
Sure. I think if you haven't seen the announcements yet on Twitter, Ben Holden, former CBS play-by-play, will be joining the show for at least the near future as he searches for a new gig inside the world of hockey. No question, someone who should be calling games to me at the professional level, and to me, just an overall great guy. He's incredibly passionate about the game of hockey, and he'll be joining us as our third co-host for these next few weeks. And so he'll be debuting with us this next week. He's spending some time away, just gathering some heat down in the great state of Florida. And of course, like the good friend he is, didn't invite us to go with him. No, I'm totally kidding. So, but a good guy. But I think the bigger thing is we have former SCSU alumni and current San Jose Sharks analyst Brett Hedican tentatively scheduled for us to be joined to record a segment this week. So we're really super excited to have him. Super, obviously, a great guy, a great pro career, and then no question has had a really good broadcasting career after he stopped playing. So Brett Hedican, again, tentatively scheduled to join us sometime this week for a recording. And then, no, I don't think I've missed anything as of yet.
I would just add this, Nick, I guess I want to know how you're doing on this Sunday. And the reason I want to know how you're doing on this Sunday, you weren't going to get away with this one. No. So for those who don't know, Nick's usually a pretty consummate professional. I would put it that way. Normally when I tell him that we're going to record at 7, he's there at 7. Nick, would you like to fill the listeners in on how your Sunday morning is going and why it went the way it did, I guess?
Let's just say that the alarm was missed. We were supposed to record at 11 o'clock this morning. It is now past noon. And essentially what happened was I was taking up an extra gig through work, and it required, I guess, a 6-hour job. And I did not get home until about 3:30 in the morning. And when I set the alarm was to say the good old ears of mine either decided not to hear the alarm, or maybe I just decided to roll over and play dead. I'm not quite sure what happened.
I contacted Nick's significant other this morning, and I kind of asked her, I said, I kind of thought once you hit the age of 30 that you just wake up before 9. Like, isn't that like a rite of passage to, when you're changing ages? I don't know.
That's only if you're in bed by 9. So
that is true. That is true. But really happy to be with all of our listeners this morning. Don't forget episodes, as you're probably understanding by now, coming out every Sunday now for the CenterIceView news and notes, and then every Tuesday for the Healthy Scratch interview segment for those who may have missed that announcement last week. With that being said, we also have a new twist coming up to CenterIceView news and notes this week. So let's jump right into it.
CenterIceView News and Notes. CenterIceView provides you with the best coverage of St. Cloud State Huskies hockey, from game notes, recaps, photos, and more. Go to CenterIceView.com.
CenterIceView news and notes, and one of our news segments, the Huskies Illustrated Weekly Roundup, as we'll begin a couple of different stories in this route. First of all, Noah, all Canadian provinces have approved NHL games. The season is set to begin on Wednesday, the 13th of January, so in a couple of days. For all teams but Dallas, who's had to wait almost another week to play because of 8 positive COVID-19 tests. The early start date for them, according to the league, is set to begin on January 19th. Although, again, that's tentative, and that could be pushed back even later, depending on whether the team personnel or the players continue to test positive for the virus.
One team that will be back in action, Nick, is the Minnesota Wild. The Minnesota Wild are set to begin play this week. Thursday, January 14th is when the Wild do start a road swing in the Honda West Division, opening in Los Angeles and Anaheim. As the 4 divisions have sponsors, more than half of the NHL clubs have included sponsors on their helmets as well to make up for lost revenue in the COVID-related season. The Wild also named Jared Spurgeon the second captain in franchise history. At age 31, Spurgeon has been in the league for just over a decade, and his 7-year deal keeps him locked up through the 2026-27 season. The Minnesota Wild are missing another body this week in Marco Rossi, who is out indefinitely with an upper body injury as of today on Sunday. And Patrice Bergeron was the only other captain to be named for an NHL club this week in Boston after Zdeno Chara signed with the Washington Capitals.
And speaking of the National Hockey League, Noah, after taking a leave of absence, Corey Crawford has retired from the NHL at the age of 36. Longtime Chicago Blackhawk, 2 Stanley Cups in 2013 and 2015. Obviously, 2-time All-Star. Effectively named the Crow, who had just signed a 2-year deal with New Jersey, but will forfeit that money, obviously, when we're in the retirement process. He will finish his career with 475 playing games, and certainly wish Corey Crawford nothing but the best. I know that he was anticipating playing for another possible Stanley Cup contender with the Islanders, but unfortunately, due to some personal reasons, as he stated in his retirement post, that he will be no longer playing in the National Hockey League.
Yeah, an opponent of the Devils in the New York Islanders would have been an opponent of Corey Crawford this year. And lone New York Islanders free agent and superstar Matthew Barzal was re-upped by the club this past week. His deal will run for 3 years and a $7 million average annual value. The contract structure is reported to be sort of a backloaded contract. The 16th overall pick in 2015 led the team with 60 points in 68 regular season games, having not missed a game in 3 full seasons on the island. Young phenom Oliver Bjorkstrand earned a 5-year, $27 million extension for Columbus, having led the Blue Jackets in goals with 21 last year, even while missing 21 games in the shortened season. Another young gun in John Marino hit a payday with a 6-year, $26.4 million extension in Pittsburgh. With the last year of his deal set to be played out this season, he tallied 26 points in 56 games on the blue line. No relation to Dan Marino, though, so I think that's important to clarify that one. In other signings, Michael Del Zotto inked a 1-year deal with Columbus, as did Riley Sheahan with Buffalo. Sami Vatanen signed with New Jersey, and the young centerman in Dylan Strome got a 2-year deal from Chicago. And last but not least, former Wild forward Luke Kunin nabbed a 2-year deal in Nashville. Kunin was part of a trade from Minnesota to the Predators for 31-year-old center Nick Bonino, and Travis Hamonic also signed with Calgary on a professional tryout offer.
But also some other hockey news, Noah, that's important, especially in the junior ranks. The WHL approved a 24-game season You start date yet to be announced yet, but a change, I guess it was supposed to start here the 8th, but the league includes 4 Western Canadian provinces and 2 in the U.S. states. So 6 teams in total for the WHL. So again, a shortened season, but one that will begin sometime here in the next few weeks.
6 provinces, not teams, 6 provinces that encompass all the teams in the WHL. Finally, other quick hits around the world of hockey include the passing of former Oilers coach John Muckler, who died at the age of 86. Muckler was part of 5 Stanley Cups in Edmonton and also coached for the Minnesota North Stars during his time in the league. And he was also part of that Ottawa Senators Cup run in 2007. Lastly, Colin Wilson retired from the National Hockey League after 11 seasons. At age 31, he retires after an 8-year stint in Nashville and 3 years with the Colorado Avalanche, amassing just under 300 points in 632 career games. Nick, really exciting to kind of hear the rumblings and things going on around the National Hockey League and the hockey world in general. I heard Henrik Lundqvist's heart surgery went about 5 hours and ended up going very well as well. So really excited to see what the upcoming season for the finish of the NCHC and the WCHA for men's and women's hockey in St. Cloud, as well as the start of the National Hockey League. Lots of things to look forward to on this January 10th. Moving over into our St. Cloud State Huskies here and women's hockey. Facing one of the best teams in the nation in the Minnesota Golden Gophers with a home-and-home series, a 3-game stint that will conclude today at 3 o'clock. They did lose both the first 2 games of the series by a score of 2-1 and 4-1. That 2-1 game was a real nail-biter, Nick. The Huskies led 1-0 after 2 periods, but Minnesota, you knew they weren't going to go away. And then that 4-1 loss that just came yesterday on Saturday, shots were 19-3 in the first period in favor of the Gophers with 4 goals in that game. So I think the Huskies rebounded really well in the latter half of the last 40 minutes of the game, but they do move to 2-6 on the year. The Gophers are going to be a good team. I mean, what do they kind of have to do today? And then, what do you take away from this series? As St. Cloud, we've talked about how they've gotten better. They're kind of in that mix now with Bemidji, with Mankato, kind of that middle of the pack group there. What do you take away from this series playing one of the best teams in college hockey on the women's side?
It shows that they're defending too much, if anything. Minnesota, again, they're a team that has, probably some of the best talent in women's college hockey. That they're a team that can be the aggressor, that can control the gameplay. And for St. Cloud, first game, we saw that, 1-0 lead going into the third period. And, it's one of those where I don't think St. Cloud, as far as the women's team, has the luxury of sitting back and just defending. Unfortunately, the talent that is coming at them is just way too good. And unless they are able to control play in the offensive zone and really keep them as far as defending their opponents are concerned in their own defensive zone, I don't think it's a recipe for success as of yet for St. Cloud. And again, Minnesota came out. They showed that they didn't really like their performance in game 1, maybe thought that, they should have been more on the aggressor in the first game. They came out flying in the second game, as we saw then, as you mentioned, 19 shots to 3 are really putting St. Cloud on their heels. And unfortunately for St. Cloud, they're a team that's really not built as of right now to come from behind either. So a tough lesson for the women team, but it's a very clear direction of where this team still needs to go as far as stepping in the right direction is concerned, taking the game plan and more of their game towards their opponent, not allowing just to sit back and allow the other team to just continue to pepper shots right at them as well.
Yeah, and I think for this women's group too, I know we've really kind of hyped them up, because there's a lot of things that are, exciting to look forward to for this group, especially compared to last year's group. There's a lot of growth, a lot of continued maturity that is starting to develop among these younger players on this roster. But I think Saturday is a really, really strong example of when you combine a team that is probably better than St. Cloud on paper with an effort level that's just not going to cut it for this women's group. And I, like I said, I know that we, talk really positively about this women's hockey group, but Saturday's game was not a game to really be all that positive about. I mean, you can't give up 4 goals in the first period against any team, but especially a group like Minnesota. It's darn near impossible to claw your way back against a group of that caliber. So I think if you're the women's hockey team, again, we preached it a lot last year. I think we need to see more of it. The 2 examples that we've seen are probably that Duluth series and then this Minnesota series, where consistency will really come back to bite you. You can't, sure, maybe if Minnesota, as you kind of alluded to, maybe had not their best start in the first game. They sneak out with a 2-1 win. The Huskies are kind of grabbing some confidence, thinking, okay, we can hang with this hockey team. You can't take your foot off the gas. You can't say, oh, well, look at the result was a 1-goal game. We're a better team this year, so that means that we can hang with the Gophers. No, anybody can win on any given night in the WCHA. And St. Cloud, like you mentioned, is a group that is still just a little bit too top heavy, and they're going to have to find a way against these teams like Minnesota to, understand that it's going to take a full 60 minutes throughout the entire lineup. You can't have an off night against a team like Minnesota. Unfortunately, they paid for it last night. We'll have to see how they do today. But, I really like the fact, though, that you did play them, tight in that first game, and I really hope the result today is a closer game as well, too, especially, Herb Brooks National Hockey Center, that bigger ice sheet as well. If you start hanging with these Minnesota teams, hanging with Duluth a little bit, hopefully when you meet them next, hanging with Wisconsin, that bodes well for this group. But right now, a real contrast between Thursday night and Saturday night showing. Hopefully they can rebound today. But moving on to men's hockey and a group, speaking of Duluth as well, they didn't really need a rebound from anything because they have just kept the train rolling. This men's hockey team, won 4-3 on the first night and kind of a last shot win sort of contest on Friday night on January 8th, and then a 1-0 overtime. I wouldn't say barn burner. It was far from that, but a very silky move by Nick Perbix for the game winner, making Roth of Duluth look absolutely silly on that one-on-one move there. So the Huskies do improve to 9-4 on the year, first in the NCHC with 27 points. They have earned a point in all but 2 games, if I'm not mistaken, this year. Nick, do you know the 2 games that they didn't earn a point against?
That would be Western Michigan.
Yep.
And that would also be, give me a second, would have been Omaha.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, by scores of 2-1 and 2-0. Otherwise, the Huskies' other 2 losses on the year have come against North Dakota and Duluth in the overtime session. Huskies improved to 2-2 in the overtime frame. Statistically, we've seen that the longer the OT goes, the better the Huskies seem to do. Only North Dakota has a better points percentage than St. Cloud State, who are just under 700 right now in their points percentage. So that's great. Plus 8 goal differential. Only Omaha and North Dakota have a better goal differential. That Omaha group, geez, what a stingy hockey team. Plus 15 for both of those teams. I think Omaha's still flying under the radar. But before I kick it over to you, Nick, the last time St. Cloud State was tied 0-0 after regulation was against Mankato on what date, Nick? Do you happen to know what year, I guess, is probably the better? January 13th of what year?
It was in the 90s.
No, a little bit more recent.
Ooh. 2004.
Close-ish. Neither team scored in the game, finished with a 0-0 tie. Bobby Getfert was a net for the Huskies on January 13th of 2007 in a 0-0 tie. Of course, Bobby Getfert, of all people, would remember a 0-0 goaltending stalemate, right, as pointed out to CenterIceView. So thank you for that information from both of those parties. But the big news in goaltending for the Huskies, David Rennick set a franchise record with his 10th shutout in a St. Cloud State uniform. This Huskies team continuing to roll, as you had mentioned and alluded to, I believe 33 points last year in 24 games. We're just approaching 13 games played now, and they're at 27 points. So 2 more wins and they'll tie that total from last year. Nick, what do you like from this Huskies group? Can we characterize this St. Cloud State group as a team that has a legitimate chance to win the NCHC this year? We talked about it in our season preview. We thought 4th or 3rd place was a real applicable spot for the Huskies. Are they exceeding expectations right now, or is this something that we should come to expect from this Huskies group through the rest of the season?
I think if you're going to characterize the squad and you're going to go back to where you thought they might be first of the season, are they exceeding expectations? I think they are. But is it really surprising? Maybe a little bit, but not by much. I mean, again, this squad that's been put together, Brett Larson, the coaching staff, they do an unbelievable job. The first time that Vietti Miettinen hasn't scored in multiple games since the pod. He had a 5-game goal streak that coming in. He's been a real spark for the reason why the Huskies are there. But one thing different about this team, Noah, is these close contests. These are, when you talk about championship teams, you find a way to stay patient. You find a way to continue with your game plan, and you don't panic And this team has not only come from behind on multiple occasions this year, but again, 4-3 against a really good team in Duluth, and then 1-0 again in overtime versus Duluth again last night. So they're winning the close games, whether it's 4-3, 1-0. They're eking it out. And again, we talked about it in our post-game recap yesterday, was, when it's a low-scoring game, and like I said, you can characterize the game in two ways. Is it a barn burner, or is it one of those where, everybody's really just trying to, play defensive hockey, good structure, and just they know the significance of the game. And, to a player's perspective, especially if you're an offensive player like I was and like you were, it's very easy to try to almost take that structure that you're in, especially if you have the puck and want to do a little bit too much. And that's exactly what the other opponents wanting to do. They want you to break up, not do what you need to do, make you make a mistake, and then capitalize on that and come back the other way. This is a good disciplined win by St. Cloud is how I would characterize it, as a team that there's not going to be room. You know what the game plan is going to be. You stick with it. You find your opportunity. Again, Nick Perbix on a forward, Kobe Bender, as you mentioned, with a nice move. And then for Perbix there again, he was almost 1-on-3 there for a moment. There was a couple of forwards changing behind him, but he recognized the situation. He took advantage of it, and a beautiful backhand between the legs move. Again, Kobe Roth, and then again on Stake Skull to get the overtime win. So the emergence of Nick Perbix to me has been a really, really good sight. We saw a little bit of that last season, but I think his emergence against Vietti Miettinen, I love the balance in these lines, that fourth line with Cockrell, Kupka, and pardon me for missing the other person right now. Who am I missing?
Yeah, why can't I think of it? Why can't I think?
Micah, no, it's not Micah.
No, it's not Micah Miller. I don't know why I can't think of it, but
why am I doing this? Oh my gosh.
But this brings up a really good point, actually, Nick, is, you mentioned Micah Miller, talk about a guy like Nolan Walker, talk about Will Hammer, guys, in that lineup, Kyler Kupka, even Thomas Rocco and, Chase Brand, when they're slotted up into the lineup, guys that, Husky fans don't immediately think of or come to mind, but guys that have been so pivotal. I mean, we look at championship teams, right? That when you get into the playoffs, right? I think back to, let's pick a playoff run. Let's pick the Pittsburgh Penguins when they went back to back. I think that's a really good group to pick on here. Sure. Is Sidney Crosby a world-class hockey player? Yep. Is Evgeny Malkin a world-class hockey player? Yep. But look at the scoring they got from guys, those depth guys that you don't even think about. Your Nick Boninos, who's now a Minnesota Wild member. Your Brian Rust, that was kind of his breakout performance. Jake Gensel in that second year against Nashville, guys that have stepped up to the plate, they're getting scoring by committee. I think that's a big thing for the Huskies. I mean, I believe, if I'm not mistaken, their leading scorer is still Nick Perbix, or Nick Perbix is right up there. So, I mean, you have a defenseman who is, almost carrying the torch, if you will. So that tells me that you have such balance in terms of scoring opportunities for these forwards. That's such a big deal for the Huskies. A couple things that I noted throughout the weekend, just in general, through fan rumblings. Number one, let's say it again. I know you've said it twice already. Vietti Miettinen. It's wrong on the sheet. Vietti has confirmed that to one of our colleagues. So that is where we're getting that information. So Vietti Miettinen, for those who are listening to the show and are wondering how to pronounce that name. The other thing that I think was kind of interesting to mention, obviously CBS broadcast on Friday night, play-by-play guy for the New Jersey Devils was doing the game. And I know people are frustrated with Ben Holden not doing the game, because Ben does such a fantastic job. We love him. We're so excited to have him. New Jersey Devils play-by-play guy is really good. I think people are kind of giving him a hard time. I don't think people know how hard it is to cover one team, especially at the National Hockey League level, when you're always in the building continuously, and then being asked on somewhat short notice to kind of call a hockey game. I believe it was virtual. I believe they were remote, for two teams that you don't particularly know that well in a league that you might not know that well. That's a challenge. And I like his rhythm. I like his delivery. I think if you've ever watched the New Jersey Devils, play-by-play highlights and listen to it, him and his color guy, who I love his color guy's voice because he's got the most New Jersey accent ever. He calls a good hockey game. So I think I wanted to point that out, because we've seen broadcasts where people haven't called a good hockey game. And I want people to kind of know that that was a good hockey call. That was a good hockey call on Friday. Saturday, I know we kind of, joked around and kind of gave the production crew a hard time. We did learn this morning too that it was mostly a student-run broadcast and a new producer, that it was his first game. It was his first game doing any NCHC action, because don't forget they were in the pod in Omaha. So all these broadcasters, they're learning, they're growing. I know we had a little bit of fun with it, but really we do wish that crew in Duluth the best. And, they're going to get better every day, just similar to Husky Productions will as well. So I did kind of want to point that out as well. Nick, I was going to add something else, but I can't. Oh, I know what it was. The last discussion we kind of saw, and I want to get your opinion on this, was talking about how the Herb Brooks National Hockey Center, is an Olympic sheet. Amsoil Arena and most other rinks are that NHL size sheet. At some point, the chillers are going to have to be replaced in the Herb Brooks National Hockey Center, which means there's going to have to be some work done in the corners, but you can't really adjust the size of the sheet too much at the Herb because of the fact that the water table, from what Chris Becker, one of our followers, had told us, you can't change it to that NHL size sheet, and then you'd have a nightmare with seating as well. What is the ideal sheet? Because hockey rinks aren't, as one fan pointed out, they're not so much like baseball stadiums where they vary wildly, but you do have some variance there. For me personally, I think Olympic sheets are almost the way to go, just because of the fact that the game has become so clogged down with guys becoming so strong and so fast. I think you really open up a lot of that skill game with that Olympic sheet. What's your preference? Do you like the NHL sheet? Would you like to see a hybrid between the two? For those who, I'm really rambling on here, but I want to give the dimensions here. For an Olympic sheet, it's 200 feet long by 100 feet wide. And for an NHL sheet, 200 feet long by 85 feet wide. So you lose 15 feet in that transfer. Nick, what's the solution for college and NHL hockey for rink sizes? What should they do?
Well, you first got to take, a look at what college hockey is. It's a developmental league. And the same reason why the NCHC was a leading, I guess, group that wanted to push the NCAA to adopt the 3-on-3 overtime is you want to mimic the NHL game as best you can. I'm with you personally on the opinion that the Olympic sheet opens up more skill. But at the end of it, you need to prepare your players for the NHL. So to do that, you need an NHL-sized rink, honestly, just because it's going to force you to make quicker decisions. It's going to force your brain to think quicker. And to me, it's if there's anything that I've noticed is that when you talk about some great players that have come through St. Cloud State, when you're playing some high level talent at the next level, and you're so used to the Olympic sheet, even we talk about this in hockey all the time. Even that split second, it sounds almost, to, I think, the casual fan, like it means nothing. To the game of hockey, it can mean the difference between the puck on your stick or the puck being taken away. So I think at the end of it, if college hockey really wants to be a better developmental league, I think they need to universally adopt the NHL size rink. Now, on a personal note, for St. Cloud, they're a training facility. So USA Hockey and training camps use their sheets all the time throughout the summer. There's also a reason that it is an Olympic-sized sheet. It's not just for the Huskies, but a ton of other programs, including USA Hockey, as I mentioned before, use it for their training for international skating. So it's kind of a catch-22 for the St. Cloud State, is because that rink, for the pandemic, it's the quietest that rink has been in probably 25, 30 years over this last few months. And so it's going to be hard because of, again, as our follower mentioned, because of just I don't know if you would call it the geographics or the hydrodynamics, or what you want to call it, for the water table. But at the end of it, I think for what the Herb was designed to be an Olympic sheet. I think they're going to have to keep that. Just because if you're going to shrink the size of the rink, you're talking about imploding the entire Herb Brooks National Hockey Center, which on a personal note, it does need quite significant upgrades. And when I say significant upgrades, it's not because I don't like what it is. It's just there are things, this rink really hasn't had much in terms of, I guess, a remodel since its induction in the 80s. And it's definitely getting due for some replacement of some things and to, I guess, some upgrades for the fan experience in 40 years. So.
Yeah, I definitely agree. It's interesting to me, though, to hear, your opinion to want that NHL size sheet, and I understand, and I guess I agree with where you're coming from, but I know my dad and I have talked about this quite extensively, and it's just like that Olympic sheet, I think, just opens up so many possibilities as well. I know we love the big hits. I know we love the physical play and that sort of thing, but let's go back to, the Duluth game last night, a 1-0 battle of defense, essentially, is what it was. I mean, there wasn't a whole lot of grade A scoring opportunities until really the latter half of the third period, I think, is when it kind of finally started to open up. I mean, both these teams were struggling so much for that open ice that, I got to be honest with you. I mean, we love the game of hockey more than anything, but for a game that was dead even through basically the entire game until the game winner, that was a boring hockey game to me. I mean, it was just really hard to watch because it was so tactically and defensively sound that, that open ice wasn't there, versus you think about the Huskies. I believe they went, if I'm not mistaken, 0 for 4 on the power play this weekend. Duluth didn't score on the power play this weekend. Teams had 7 combined power play goals, if I'm not mistaken, through the weekend prior, at the Herbrooks National Hockey Center. So what does that tell you about puck possession and that, and the special teams game is that's where you're starting to really open up that skill level. And I'm curious to hear your thoughts on this, because for me, I guess I saw a much, much more wide open game at the Herb that was, I guess, pretty exciting. Although the 4-3 game on Friday night was a really good game in Duluth too. So not to say that you can't have those high scoring games. We see it in the National Hockey League all the time, but I just think that Olympic sheet opens up so many possibilities. I would love to see a hybrid sheet. I would love to see something in between there, but that's just never going to happen.
At least as right now. I don't think you can directly correlate the game plan necessarily, as far as, especially between these two clubs who face each other 4 straight times, right, to the size of the ice sheet. Because are we really talking about the same tactical defensive if, we're coming out of a split in St. Cloud and one team wins it, so it's a 2-1. Duluth really knew that they were, this was an important game. St. Cloud State knew this was going to be an important game for Duluth on home ice. This would have been taking essentially 9 of 12 points were on the line for the Huskies after it was all said and done. But had they won in regulation, it would have been 10 of 12 points. That is the longest stretch in terms of being on the losing side for Duluth all season. And so this was a pivotal game for both Duluth and for St. Cloud. And yeah, you can use the ice dimensions maybe in your benefit or maybe, not so much, but are you really changing your tactics, whether it's a 100 foot east-west versus 85? No, you're not. No,
you really think? I mean, no, I guess I disagree with you there, just because wasn't Duluth like the first or second team in the NCHC as far as power play was concerned coming into, I believe, at least last weekend, if not this weekend. So part of me is like, when I look at the power play, I mean, Brett Larson said it in our interview, I guess I'm just thinking, I guess you're saying the strategy doesn't change, and I guess I would agree with you there. But I think what you can do, you think about an overload, right? Or when you run a scissor play coming down from the bottom, if you're running an overload and those two players, the player on the half wall and the player down below the goal line, they scissor and cross there. I mean, you got 10 feet of open ice that you can run that play versus in Duluth, you can't. So, I mean, I guess I'm just trying to clarify what you're trying to say, because I'm trying to figure out if I agree with you or not.
No, so right, the strategy doesn't change, but the funny thing is in hockey, we talk about what area of the ice do we always want. It's the middle of the ice. We're not saying take the puck wide per se. Now you do, especially in a zone entry like you're mentioning, because you're trying to stretch out the defenseman, and maybe that's where tactically, like you mentioned, the scissor change that really does, take precedence. But at the end of the day, again, I want the NCAA to be a developmental league for the National Hockey League. And my concern with having that extra sheet of ice is you become used to that being successful. You're used to having that extra, the extra room, and then you shrink that 15 feet down. And we talked about, even a foot in hockey is a big deal.
So does the NHL, should the NHL adopt an Olympic sheet? I guess maybe that's the better question. You don't think so?
No, I don't.
Really?
And here's why. It adds, because you have the best players in the world on this sheet. Every inch of ice is contested. Now, what I love about the NHL is the fact that I think the rink dimensions help with the parity of the league. The league has changed essentially since they got rid of the 2-line pass. For those who don't remember, that was the dumbest rule in hockey. Yeah. It just was awful. They've also done a kind of a number on terms of having the Department of Player Safety and really looking back at, hits that maybe were seen by those folks at home, but were by the refs, and they were going on call. So, you could say the ruckus and the physicality of the game has gone down way a lot since, I would say the last lockout in 2015. I should say the full season lockout. The last lockout was in 2012. But I like the dimensions where they're at. because it forces you to make decisions quick. It forces you to maintain puck possession. It forces you to also where if, these big, strong, fast human beings are going to stand up at the blue line, you're going to have to play a chip and chase game, which means you're going to engage in a physical battle. I don't want both these teams to go east and, go coast to coast and, kind of scissor in between. To me, that, there's some excitement to that, but I don't want Mario Lemieux to be cloned 10 times to go up and down the ice.
So I guess I want to ask about this, and this is partly my own opinion, partly me trying to play devil's advocate, because I know you're sleepy and groggy, so I think I have you this morning, or this afternoon, I should say. But I think we see a lot of that at the NHL level, where you have that floated off the glass and just kind of regroup and kind of recalibrate, if you will. I want to go back to a specific game. And a game, I believe it was on an Olympic sheet. So correct me if I'm wrong here. Team North America versus Team Sweden a couple of years ago in the World Cup of Hockey. Was that on an Olympic sheet or an NHL sheet?
That was in Toronto.
Yeah, NHL sheet. Okay, so I'm thinking, with a game like that, imagine how much that game opens up even more on an Olympic sheet. I mean, you have guys who are already skilled. I guess for me, it's like, I think you have some really exciting NHL games, but think about let's pick the Minnesota Wild and watching their games. The Minnesota Wild, puck off the glass, puck off the glass, puck off the glass, to alleviate pressure. And part of me is just
when you have no center help down low.
Yeah. Well, yeah, true. But I guess part of me is just kind of like, you don't teach that, that high flying style of offense. And maybe you're right. Maybe it is this really good balance where you have enough high flying skill, but enough of that physicality and that old school mentality to keep the old geezers happy, that grew up with the clutch and grab of the 70s and 80s. But, I don't know. For me, I guess I just think, and I guess what happens if it goes to an Olympic sheet? Do we hit a point where that physicality players don't know how to hit anymore? I don't know. Maybe you are right where we need to stay there too. I don't know what the answer is. And one fan pointed out very humorously, but almost with a little bit of truth, it seems like whatever rink you don't have, whatever size you don't have, that's the one you want, depending on the team you have that year.
Yeah, and it becomes I think the debate, if you really analyze it, it comes down to how much offense is too much offense in the National Hockey League. We've seen games, I think lopsided games or
football scores,
right, 9-1 or 10-2. I don't think hockey is ready for that just yet, honestly. I like the 4-3 games. Now, do we love the 1-0 overtime games? It depends on how it's played, right? Now, in a contested ice sheet where both teams, such as the Duluth Bulldogs and the Huskies for St. Cloud, are just sticking to the structure. And again, it's a boring game because, again, tactically they're sound, right? It's in the NHL, you're going to get the same type of affair, but it's faster, it's bigger, it's stronger. And, there's more aggression to try to break the other one's structure down versus, I guess, trying to play the more weighted out and see who breaks first kind of deal, which I think is where college hockey is right now. At the end of it, it's a balancing act, as you mentioned. And, I wouldn't mind seeing a 6-5 game, but I don't know if expanding the ice sheet is the issue. Plus, you also have to understand, too, in the National Hockey League level, you're sharing facilities, half of them with the NBA. So at the end of it, the arenas themselves, are they capable of even fitting an NHL-sized rink inside those buildings? I don't think half of them are. I really don't think they have that room. So the XL definitely can't, because you're trying to build your fans as close as you can. That's ticket sales, it's everything else. So, I mean, if you were to make that call, you're talking every single owner of the National Hockey League, including Seattle's building, mind you, which is just getting remodeled, having to change everything. I just don't think that, especially when the NHL can, afford that cost. Now, in hockey in the next 20 years, if things continue to change, is that maybe a conversation we revisit? Maybe. Just because I don't know, because there's been a debate too about the, how about the players from Sweden and Finland and from the European style coming over, which use Olympic sheets? How well did they adjust to the game? Well, I think there's plenty of names out there that says, yeah, they can. They're doing just fine. The smaller ice sheet to me is okay. I don't think the NHL needs to go the opposite way where they're trying to pursue the international game. I don't think that's necessary. The NHL sets the standard. You have to, take what's given, and you got to make the best of what your dimensions are. And again, the speed and the skill game in the NHL right now is really, really good, but you have to also be able to say, hey, defensively, you can either choose to take that ice, you can give it if you want. And at the end of it, the defensemen that we're seeing now in the NHL too also have a pretty good they're skating. They can skate, they can defend, they can hang with these guys. And so to me, it's still much of a speed game, but tactically is where you're going to see the differences. And that to me, the ice sheet to me is irrelevant in that conversation.
Yeah, just don't come at me, anybody, saying you need to change the size of the hockey nets. Once we start that discussion, I have no time for you. Not a chance. That just changes the integrity of the game. Anyway, speaking of international play, though, Nick, our last topic of the day we do have to jump into, and one I suppose you and I are pretty excited about when we talked to Abby Thiessen, who will join us on Tuesday. She wasn't so thrilled as a Red Deer, Alberta native, and that is the World Junior Tournament. The United States winning gold by a score of 2-0 over a Canadian team that was the heavy favorite in that championship game before eking out a win the day before the U.S. did in the final 90 seconds of regulation to punch their ticket to the gold medal game. Brett Larson was an assistant coach on that squad last year, so he kind of knows a lot of those guys and was, I'm sure, really happy to see them continue to grow and have that success, as he had mentioned in our interview last week, how having a team that brings back a lot of players that's a year older and a year stronger is really, really pivotal. Nick, I mean, what did you kind of pull away from the United States 2-0 win? The United States, fun fact, the last 4 times they have met Canada in the gold medal game in the World Junior Tournament, they have won all 4 games. You got to love it. I believe it was this year, 2017, 2010, and 2004, if I'm not mistaken. That's just running off the top of my head. So don't tell me I sound right, because then you're just lying to the listeners. You never think I'm right. So really, what is right, though, is the U.S. team just seemed to get better and better every game in this tournament. So what did you like from the U.S.? How did their road to the gold medal game, how did it culminate? Did you expect this U.S. team to win a gold medal out of the gate, or, what surprised you, what didn't?
I don't think it was any surprise that the 2 favorites to meet for the gold medal game were the U.S. and Canada. It's kind of been trending that way lately. And of course, the Finns and the Swedish teams are always right up there in the mix as well. Russia, to me, if there's any surprise, Russia didn't look that good at all.
No.
Usually they're a team that, they usually are carried by goaltending. Usually they're a team that can score. They're not a team that's known for defensive hockey, that's for sure, but they're a team that almost beats you by just outscoring you. And Russia just did not seem to have anything really put together. They looked like a team that was very discombobulated. But yeah, for Team Russia, they really just couldn't do anything. At the end of the day, they're a team that has to outscore you to win. And, going back to the U.S. and Canada, Dave Starman, a good friend of the podcast, who was on the analyst role for the NHL Network, said it briefly, is that the United States was the only team that could execute the game plan that they did to beat Canada. The forward gaps, and he talked about this a lot, the U.S. were basically a 5-man unit in all 3 areas of the ice, especially to the neutral zone. They did not give Canada any room to stretch the play, to use their speed. Defensively, they were clogging the middle, getting in shot lanes. They were blocking shots. At the end of it, Canada was a team, and you could see it really start in, as I said, the midpoint of the game, 10-minute mark in the second period. They were getting frustrated. There was not as much open ice as they could. They couldn't break down the U.S. structure, and they ended up trying to force pucks. They were trying to stretch the ice a little bit too much instead of really coming up the ice as a unit. And again, credit to the U.S. There was just not any room for them to come in, especially carrying the puck in the offensive zone. And you got to credit also to the U.S. defense, where when Canada finally learned, we're going to have to shift this puck in and get it. The defensemen who are very mobile, Cam York, one of them, and we got Jacob Sanderson, also a UND a freshman, I should say. One of the was he 4th overall again? 5th overall again in this draft. These defensemen are incredibly well on their feet, and so they're able to go retrieve it, go move the puck up the ice, and I think just having good breakouts too for the U.S. Were really key. 2 kind of quirky goals for the U.S. in this game, but at the end of the day, they don't ask you how, they ask how many, and so for the U.S. and for I don't know if any of the gold medal games they've ever shut out Canada, especially for a team that I think, if I remember correctly, outscored their opponent before this game 41-4. And there was talks in Canada, both on Sportsnet and TSN, that they were comparing this hockey team in terms of their dominance to the 2005 squad, in terms of just how well they were dominant, and to go in to be shut out on home ice essentially in Edmonton / Red Deer. and have the U.S. come in and basically take their flag and stomp it into the ice in Canada is going to be kind of a reality check for the Canadian World Junior Club. But more so, credit to the U.S. I mean, that game plan was executed beautifully. They were speedful. They were very, very good with puck possession. They did not feed into Canada's game plan at all. They were patient. They got good shots in on net, and they were creating a lot of havoc too in front of their net too. And Spencer Wright too, the couple of times that Canada did give some great chances, he was there to make the save. So great game by the U.S. To me, I will say this: the third period was a little bit scary. I think U.S. was defending a little bit too much. And to me, if Canada had potted one, Noah, and I think you'll agree with me on this, we could be talking about a loss for the U.S. in terms of Canada. To me, Canada was one of those teams where it reminded me so much of the Huskies versus AIC game a couple of years ago, where you just needed one to go and just to feel some sort of confidence or you were seeing something good happen. And I think Canada would have had a really nice energy boost had they got one in past Spencer to make it 2-1. And with the pressure they were putting on, again, U.S. was defending very, very well, but you could see possibly how the train would roll down uncontrollably down the hill per se. So overall, great tournament. I know a lot of people are kind of crapping on maybe Team Austria, Team Switzerland for not being at that level, but you don't get better in an international tournament unless you play good teams. You just don't. Again, Switzerland, they've generated some good hockey players over the years. They just don't have the depth. Again, Austria, Marco Rossi was their only first-round pick since Thomas Vanek. So they're a country that maybe hockey isn't quite their number one thing. But again, in order to know where you got to go, you got to play good competition. So overall, it's my favorite hockey tournament of the year. Great for the U.S. to take home the gold. It was a good gold medal game between them and Canada. It was a must-watch for me. I'm sure it was a must-watch for you, Noah. And overall, to me, it was a great tournament.
I think it was the first game in 5 medal games between the U.S. and Canada where there hasn't been a lead change or 2 goals scored within the last 5 minutes of the game or something like that. We've seen some pretty crazy lead changes and lead swings, if you will, in those games. Number one that you had kind of pointed out for me, the third period for the United States or for Canada, if Canada comes out like that for the full 60 minutes, it's not even a contest. I mean, that Canadian team was a very, very good team. You mentioned the 2005 group that was actually in Grand Forks for the World Junior Tournament. I was at those games. That was a good hockey team, and I was 8 or 9 years old. So if you can notice it then, you're definitely going to notice it now. You talked about the U.S. And kind of you mentioned kind of fluky goals, and yeah, they were. Although the one was a really nice redirect. But one of the things I liked about the U.S. attack, I thought the first period was kind of a momentum swing back and forth where neither team really had a real stranglehold until maybe the U.S. in the last couple minutes of the first period. U.S. definitely had the second period for the majority of the period, except for probably the tail end of that. Third period, all Canada. But you look at both of the 2 U.S. goals. And the play actually, the first shift was a 55-second shift that ends up in the back of the net, running a simple cycle. But both of these goals actually, even though they ended up on forward sticks for, the goal, actually started with the United States defensemen and their willingness to move plays from low to high. And what I mean by that is this. Really good hockey teams. Take, for example, the Tampa Bay Lightning, who just won a Stanley Cup last year. They're a group that's not afraid to move pucks east-west with their defensemen and their forwards. Sometimes it almost looks like a power play to them where you're seeing, a play go from down low to up high to across to across. The U.S., I think their defensemen just had a willingness to know situational play. I think they just knew when was the right time to force that pass versus when was the right time to just dump a puck in. And you think about the United States, they were not a team with their skill and speed that was going to overwhelm Canada with their skill. Canada was the better skill team. There is no doubt about that. So the U.S. realized that to generate offense, they were going to have to keep pucks along the wall. They were going to have to keep puck possession and try to get a group hemmed in their own zone and just continue to cycle the puck down low, throw a puck on net, throw a puck down in the corner. That's what the U.S. did. And you continue to wear and tear and grind down this Canada team. You look at the first goal, a cycle that runs for 55 seconds, shot on net from a defenseman gets redirected. Really nice play. That's the culmination of pinning a Canadian team in their own zone and then getting a line change in there as well. Second goal at the start of a period, same typical play where you establish that forecheck goes up to the point and it just gets thrown down low, gets a really fortuitous bounce off the back of the net. Good things happen when you're around the net. U.S. player capitalizes for that 2-0 lead. I think the U.S., it was about as textbook of a game as you could have had against that Canadian team, like you mentioned, because this Canadian team, as Dave Starman had alluded to on the broadcast, really hadn't been tested. So, they were kind of on their heels, and the U.S., credit to them, came out a little bit like a buzzsaw, especially in that second period, and didn't sit back and took charge. Here's the biggest takeaway from me that absolutely irritates me as an American hockey fan. And I forget the guy's name, but we were watching, obviously, the NHL Network broadcast. Mike Rupp was on the right side. I forget who was in the middle. Do you remember the name of the guy who was on the left by chance?
Radek?
It's because I don't know his name. He's a
Canadian. That or Tony Luffman.
He's a Canadian boy. Wears glasses. He's a Canadian boy.
That's EJ Radek.
Yeah, and he's one of these diehard old school Canadian announcers. And I gotta tell you, man, the U.S. comes out and plays arguably their best period in the tournament in the second period, is all over Team Canada. And they go into that intermission break, and you know what this guy says? He's talking about how Spencer Knight is keeping him in this hockey game. Spencer Knight didn't keep the U.S. in that hockey game until the third period. Spencer Knight played very, very well. U.S. didn't need Spencer Knight until the third period. I'm sorry. U.S. was the more dominant team through the first 40 minutes. And I got to tell you, as an American, I'm not chapped because I'm an American. I'm chapped because there are still, even today, after all these performances in the World Juniors and the grudge matches, not even in the medal round, but just in general, the U.S. and Canada have had, where these old school Canadian boys still think that Canada is this perennial dominant powerhouse in the world of international hockey. Canada's a very good team. Canada always fields a very good team. U.S. is catching up. U.S. is a very good hockey team. Finland's very good. Sweden's very good. Russia, depending on the year, is very good. We've seen a couple German teams that have been very strong. I just don't understand why during that broadcast he could not give the United States credit for being arguably the better team through the first 40 minutes. I don't know what it is with that mentality. I don't know if Canada's just, it's their game. They don't want to let it go.
That's it. That's literally what it is.
It pissed me off something fierce, Nick, because here's the deal. If North Dakota, who we hate, we don't hate them, but you know what I mean? Big rivalry, right?
We despise them.
If North Dakota comes in, right, and walks all over the Huskies for the first two periods of a hockey game, you and I are not going to sit on a broadcast and say, oh, well, Adam Shield really keeping North Dakota in this game. It would be all Huskies if it wasn't for that. How in the world can St. Cloud State be down in this group? It just doesn't, was he not watching the same game we were watching? It was just, for me, if you think about American fans and the World Juniors, because the games don't get really aired in the U.S. besides NHL Network, which is bogus in its own right, but we'll get to that another day. When you have your largest amount of American and international watchers during that game, probably for the whole tournament, for the American team, and people who maybe don't know the game that well, how do you sit there and not be objective about this hockey game? It's just, for me, I just get so irritated when people are not objective about the game. And I know you're looking at me like, okay, you just need to calm down a little bit. But for me, I'm just like, tell the listeners what is happening. If North Dakota is up 5-0 on the Huskies, I'm not going to say the only reason is because of Adam Shield. I'm going to say we're getting our asses kicked by North Dakota. That's just what's happening.
We forget that in Canada, there's a big semblance of pride that comes with the game. It's, compared to here in the U.S., it's football, right? It's something that on Sundays you do. You sit back, you grab your favorite beverage, you grab some snacks, you grab some family, your friends, and you're watching football. For Canada, it's hockey night in Canada on Saturdays. It used to be, and again, that is their sport. So to them, it's more than just a tournament. It's more than just that. It is a semblance of Canadian pride. It's because that is their game. So to me, it's not facetious, I don't think. I just think that it means so much more to that country than it does to us. And so, yeah, do they get away from maybe the objectivity of the argument? But at the end of it, it's kind of that pridefulness which drives this rivalry also. It's because the U.S. is still, if you want to call it, I would still say that Canada is the better perennial hockey organization. Hockey Canada, to me, still is. I know plenty of people in Hockey Canada, great people, prideful people. and they have one goal every single term, and that is we want to take home gold. And essentially, the expectation is also, Noah, to win gold, and if anything less than that is essentially seen as a failure at the end of it.
Which to point out very quickly, this group was one heck of a Canadian group, and they should be very cherished by this group. And number two, the barrel thing was not meant as a disrespect to Canada. If you ever get a chance to take a look at that, I hope you touch on that a little bit, because that's the only thing I miss talking about. But yeah, this Canadian group, very good hockey team, and arguably could have won probably any other 9 out of 10 games that night.
And that at the end of it, when you throw the Americans in there, and Hockey Canada knows the American National Team Development Program is a program that is now meant to be reckoned with. Meaning, I think if you rewind the clocks 10 years, even 10 years ago, they're a team that's getting better, but it's like they're kind of like still maybe a Russia team or a Finnish team where they're going to have like the rise and then they're going to fall back down again. The U.S. program is now we have the gold medals to prove it. They're a team that's now consistently on the same level as Canada is. And so you're starting to get this rivalry where between, these two countries, it's almost expected and anticipated that these two are going to meet in the gold medal game for these World Juniors. I think what even sparks this debate even further is, let's go back to the 2010 Winter Olympics in Vancouver, the overtime winner by Sidney Crosby. That was probably, in terms of a full 60-minute hockey game, and then going into overtime, one of the best hockey games I've ever seen in my life. That rivalry between the U.S. and Canada, that just took it to another level. It starts at the World Juniors, and it continues to be that international play, but it's feeding off of that game, the 3-2 win for Canada. Again, inside at that time, it was GM Place, I still believe, in 2010. If not, it's up there in Vancouver.
Yeah, Rogers Center now.
Rogers Center, thank you. It was GM Place for a while. But at the end of it, this is great for the game of hockey. And I think you alluded to it perfectly, and that is, why in the hell, pardon my French, is any U.S. major broadcast network not allowing this to be aired on Channel 5, Channel 4, or something like that, something where people can watch this?
NBC.
NBC. Somebody, to me, if NHL is smart, because again, they own NHL Network, they're also run cooperatively with the MLB media, so that's one thing that people should know. But if you're trying to grow the game and you're trying to expose people to some really good youth, first of all, we can't even see college hockey unless you're in your Minnesota and you have Fox 9 and Fox 9 Plus, which is great, right? But why can't NBC, as part of their deal, say, hey, World Junior, that's a big freaking deal. We want the World Junior tournament to be on Channel 11 so people can watch it and give somebody an alternative.
At least the medal round, if anything. At least the
medal round, yeah. At least the medal round. At the end of it, that's the only way you're going to grow this game. And to me, it's sad to say that we're in this debate between these two clubs, but at the end of it, it's a debate because they're two very, very good programs, and they've gotten to a point now where it's become almost that Minnesota North Dakota rivalry, almost kind of feel to it. And to me, it's much watch hockey. It is. I just think at the end of it, you need to promote the sport this way, and for people to watch it and really understand how well this U.S. National Team Development Program has come along in even 10 years. You need to reward that by giving them some freaking airtime. Seriously, that was one fun hockey game to watch the last couple of weeks, and at the end of it, watch the U.S. get gold, and let's give them some freaking praise for once in the freaking role. I mean, seriously.
And that's what I'm asking to kind of wrap up this point here is, is whatever his name is. See, I don't even know his name because I'm so irritated. Is he doing a disservice for people watching the game, who aren't diehard Canadian or American fans, by not being objective about it? And I know we kind of shrug it off, and it's a lot easier to shrug it off when the U.S. wins, but it's kind of like, I guess for me, it was just kind of like, our goal in the game is always to paint the fans a picture of what's going on. We talked a little bit earlier about the women's hockey team, right? How the women's hockey team struggled against the Gophers. Sure, we want to try to stay positive if we can, but like the women's hockey team played poorly against the Gophers on Saturday, had a very, very poor start. We're not going to sugarcoat that for you because that's what happened. So for me, I guess it's just kind of like, I don't know, maybe it's just our mentality that I feel like we need to provide the full scope and the full picture for people. I guess I just want to,
the only thing I will say, Noah, is does Paul Allen always, crap on the Vikings, even though they really no. I think at the end of it, and Grandview, I love Paul Allen. I think calls a great game, but there's still, again, the Canadian pride factor is always going to be there with these people.
Sure.
And at the end of it, it actually probably could have turned a little bit funny if somebody, as like the other analysts, because there was 2 analysts in the room there, maybe who was an American person, decided to call them out a little bit and have a little bit more fun with it, then I don't think we're having this conversation, So you can have a little bit of Homer. I have no issue with that, but don't be afraid to stand up and be like, hey man, no, this is not the Spencer Knight show. He had to make some okay saves in the second period, but it wasn't like he was being bombarded. It's not like Canada was generating, grade A scoring chance after grade A scoring chance. There was maybe 2, if not 3 of those in the entire period. And yes, when your goaltender needs to come up and make a save, that's when they needed him. He did, but it wasn't like, the U.S. was, had defensive breakdowns or Canada was really moving the puck into really good areas. No, they were preventing them. So there was Spencer Knight, but also the 5 guys in front of him that were making life a living hell for Team Canada to try to get those really good scoring opportunities. So to me, whatever. It's a moot point to me. He can say what he wants, because guess what? Around the neck here in the U.S., we have that thing that's hanging and it's made of gold. So I don't care.
Yeah. I believe Mike Rupp is an American too, although he was wearing, as my dad would put it, a clown suit. He didn't understand how the pants matched the suit. He thought that was kind of funny. I would say actually probably the best move in that game actually came from the Canadians, though. I believe it was in the second period, that move, that 3-on-1 that developed. I think the U.S. was on a power play. Bowen Byram, shorthanded, hits the post on that, that quick transition there. That was a pretty play. So that was probably my favorite play of the entire tournament, even though it didn't actually really amount to anything. But nonetheless, really happy the United States got gold. And like you mentioned, that's exactly what matters. Speaking of things that are going to be absolutely golden starting this upcoming week, we do have Abby Thiessen and Hallie Theodosopoulos joining us this Tuesday for our Healthy Scratch interview segment. So be sure to check that one out. We had lots of laughs and a lot of fun with that one. And then, as we mentioned, we will be recording with Brett Hedican this week, hopefully. So we should have that one a week from Tuesday in our next Healthy Scratch interview segment for episode number 45. But episode number 45 on Sunday starts off with a bang with our new co-host. Really excited for him to join us. Former CBS play-by-play announcer for 11 years in Ben Holden. Really excited for everything that's coming on for the Huskies Warming House podcast. Nick, anything to add before we bid our listeners adieu?
I'll make sure next week to set 2 alarms.
No worries. We'll have this content up real soon, hopefully on this Sunday. And we wish you a wonderful Sunday and a wonderful week from the Huskies Warming House podcast, and hope to see you back in the den soon.